Nothing says love like anal sex, man.
Pretty much. I mean, it legitimately, that's what it says on the inside of my wedding ring. So,
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses nerddom through various segments. My name is Tyler Hunt, and I'm here with my co-host, as always, Pat Kuhn. How's it going, dude?
it's good, man. I finally got my movie pass card, so that's awesome. I had a little bit of trouble with it. Well, I mean, other than the fact that it took like over a month to get it. I went and saw Kingsman the other night, and I was super, super nervous about it because I heard some horror stories since they bumped it down to $10 a month that people haven't been able to use the app, and customer service has really been really poor. So I went there super early, and yep, I definitely had trouble with the app. It crashed a couple of times on me. It took me like 6 tries before it actually let me check in. And then I'd heard some other horror stories that even when it lets you check in, it declines your card when you go to swipe it. So there was a lot of anxiety when I went to go see Kingsman, but I was able to see it. But yeah, it wasn't off to a good start, especially, I mean, considering it, I literally signed up for the thing August 16th and didn't get my card until like the 22nd, 23rd, something like that. So it was more than a month. Basically, they failed at every level.
I wish I could say that I'm surprised, but you won't stop bitching about it on Facebook, so I was very aware of this story already.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's all I have. Most of my personality is me complaining about something. So it's like if I'm not bitching, it's just I'm not talking.
Heaven forbid.
Touche.
On the other side of things, like I got my movie pass card before you, and I signed up after you by a few days, and I've seen 2 movies with it and have had no problems either time. So
I think now, granted, I know that I was the one that brought it up because I'm usually the one that brings this conversation up, but I feel like you weave the fact that you signed up after me into conversation just to rub it in.
I'm just saying that my experience with MoviePass so far, and honestly the first time around until I started jacking their prices up, has been pretty flawless.
Yeah, I was nervous, like I said, about the app working and it not declining my card because I've tried to call them about my card, not getting my card. And we both had it before they jacked up the prices and we both quit. Before, like if they didn't have the time in their app so you couldn't check in, you could call them and they would manually kind of put it through. But I was nervous because I wasn't sure if they were going to even answer because I've tried to call them about the card and they didn't answer then. So there was a lot of anxiety. I'm glad that you got to see 2 movies, Dick. And I'm actually going to go see another one tonight if I feel up to it. I've been up since 5 o'clock this morning, so we'll see if I feel up to it. But
let me guess,
yeah, I'm definitely
Lego Ninjago?
No, I'm going to see that on Monday. I decided since I'm off on Mondays, I figured I would go see that when the kids are in school.
Yeah, you might have the theater to yourself.
I know.
Rub one out.
I'm not sure that that's going to happen, but it's weird that we both our minds went to the same place because I was actually thinking, maybe I could watch this movie naked.
Oh man,
that's weird, right?
Yeah. That's an image in my mind that I'm never going to be able to erase. So thank you.
Yeah, it's an inside joke between me and my buddies from high school that may or may not be listening to it, so it might just be a joke that I made for nobody. But I'm actually going to see Wind River is what the movie I'm going to try to see tonight.
I don't know.
I've heard some really good things.
What is that?
It's the, who's in it? Jeremy Ritter? Is that his name?
Oh, is that the Jeremy Renner, Elizabeth Olsen movie?
Yes.
Okay.
That looks really, really good.
Yeah, that does look good.
So, it looks so good. I'm super excited about it that I'm so excited about it that I actually had to look up the name of it. So.
And you really fucked up his name, and he's like a pretty well-known actor at this point.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's pretty well established that if I have to say a name, I'm gonna mess it up. All right, man. So let's get this started. If this is your first episode, we start off each episode by kind of just checking in with each other. We call it what we're into. So what are you into this week?
I watched the season 2 premiere of Vice Principals. So,
all right, cool.
This is the show that's on HBO that stars Danny McBride and Walter Goggins. And I talked about Vice Principals season 1 a couple of times last year when it debuted. And overall, the first season was pretty good, but it wasn't anything spectacular. It was pretty forgettable, to be honest. I was a bigger fan of the other HBO comedy that Danny McBride did, which is Eastbound and Down. With that being said, season 2, I think, is off to a great start. And it actually, like the season 2 premiere, might be the funniest episode of the entire series, in my opinion. So season 1 was challenging at times because of the muddled morality between the characters, and there was a lack of something to latch onto emotionally because obviously you're kind of rooting for Danny McBride and Walter Goggins, but at the same time, they're pretty terrible people. So almost, like I said, even side characters, almost everybody in that first season was a piece of shit. So it was pretty much, you were just watching it for the comedy and for the laughs, not really so much to, again, latch onto something emotionally. So season 2 promises to kind of go in a different direction. And it looks like it's going to be a whodunit in regards to who shot Neil Gamby at the end of season 1. The obvious answer going into this season and after season 1 wrapped was that it was Belinda Brown, the principal that they tormented and basically blackmailed to quit. But this episode does a pretty good job of showing her innocence and, setting this season up as being kind of a detective-like season. So, in addition to setting up what is, I'm sure, going to be a very humorous second season, this episode also brought the comedy by showing Gamby's recovery from being shot. We pick up months into it, and the dynamic of this character pretty much giving up and the numerous things he does and says in response to being kind of disabled is pretty hilarious. The dialogue in this episode is pretty great. Gamby, of course, like Danny McBride, always has great one-liners, but it's Walter Goggins has this part in this episode that made me laugh the hardest, and it's whenever he's become principal of the high school because he and Gamby were going to be co-principals, and obviously Gamby's been out after he got shot, and he describes the difficulties of being principal as an orgy with his boss, the faculty, the parents, and the students, and he's very graphic in describing what each of those parties are doing to him in said orgy, and it's fucking hilarious. He mentions it's the worst orgy he's ever been a part of. So, I wasn't too incredibly excited when the show was premiering, but knew I'd watch it because I watched the first season, and they've only committed to making 2 seasons of this show, so this is the last season. But this episode really set them up pretty well, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the final season of the show, and definitely respect that they're sticking to their guns and just doing seasons 1 and 2.
Yeah, this was a series that I picked up after you had talked about it, and I'm really glad. I think I might have actually, it sounds like I like it a little bit more than you do. I did like some of the character work that they did in the first season. Sounds like you were just sticking with it because it was funny and it is funny. But yeah, I really enjoyed the character stuff in the first season, even though they aren't characters that you necessarily want to root for. By the end, I kind of find myself rooting for them. Maybe that tells you a little bit more about my personality than anything else. But,
does, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely see a little bit of these characters in me. But Yeah, I think the first season or the first episode of the second season is really funny. I did enjoy that orgy comparison quite a lot as well. I love those two actors quite a lot. Yeah, I think it's a really good show. I think it's off to a good start with this first episode. I don't know why I keep saying that. But yeah, I think the character stuff, at least in this first episode, is a lot better than it was in the first season, even though I did like it a little bit more than you did. I think that his recovery is really funny, and it kind of gives you a window into his personality.
Yeah, sure, man. So what are you into this week?
I am into American Vandal, which this show, if you're not aware, is kind of a weird show in multiple sense. But I think it's kind of weird because it's a Netflix original show and it's parodying another Netflix original show. It's kind of like them poking fun at themselves, which I thought was strange because it's kind of poking fun at Making a Murderer, the true crime documentaries and stuff like that. So it's formatted like a true crime documentary, but it's obviously not really a documentary, just in the way that The Office isn't really a documentary either. So it's just written and it's performed by actors, but it's filmed like a documentary. And the case that they're investigating is a student was expelled from his high school because the school board believed he was the one who spray painted dicks on all the teachers' cars. And that concept is obviously funny for just really obvious reasons, but I find it even more funny because that some aspect of that actually happened at my high school when I was a senior. It obviously didn't completely happen the way they do it in the true crime doc, but we had a person, and I don't remember who it was, honestly. They were trying to catch somebody who was drawing dicks around the school. I remember, like, every so often I'd come into the school and they'd be like, "Oh, guess what? They found another dick." Like, it was this big thing, a big whodunit my senior year of high school. And I thought that was really funny that they kind of made a show about it. Not obviously they didn't base it on what happened at my high school years ago. It was kind of funny because it connected in a weird way to me in that sense. But, my wife and I started this, the first episode last Friday. I guess that's when it premiered. And it was really funny, but the episodes are like 35 minutes or something like that. And by the time we got to the end of the first episode, we were like, yeah, that was really funny, but there's 7 more episodes. What are they going to do? Because I felt like the concept was already kind of getting a little thin. And so I wasn't really sure how they were going to do 8 episodes. But I think what they did to their benefit was they really kind of investigated every aspect of the crime or the case. And it really was just really hilarious, and it kept it really fresh. For example, there was one episode where they had a witness to the crime, the supposed crime, and they basically just broke down that witness's credibility. And it was actually one of my favorite parts of the show is where they talk about how he went to summer camp and he may or may not have gotten a hand job from this girl. And they talk about all these angles in which somebody could have witnessed the hand job. And there's like this diagram of this person jerking off this other person. It got me every single time that they showed it. It was really, really funny. And that's what made this show good and kept it fresh is they went every angle of this case. Like, the kids took it so seriously, and it was really, really funny, and it kept it really fresh. And it really shines. Like, the first few episodes are really, really funny, but then kind of when it gets into the middle of the season, the show really shines when they start doing more character work and you start to care about these kids. Yes, some of them are douchebags. Actually, most of them are douchebags, but they're high school kids, so you kind of expect that. But you start to actually care about some of these characters, and so that's where the show kind of shines. I've heard it compared as Freaks and Geeks meets Making a Murderer, which I think that's kind of the perfect comparison. Obviously, it's been a while since I've been in high school, but I was actually a student teacher not too long ago. It's been a few years, and I think that the show does a really good job of kind of hitting the nail on the head as far as the kids' obsession with social media and stuff like that. Like when I was in high school, we had LiveJournal and we had MySpace and all that good stuff, but we hadn't had Instagram or anything like that yet. So, I definitely think that they kind of hit the nail on the head with all that stuff. So I definitely think it's freaks and geeks for sure for kind of this generation. And I really appreciated that. And if it wasn't enough, the last couple episodes, you think that they're starting to kind of wind down and you think you know who actually did it. And there's some really cool twists towards the end of this season. The last couple episodes are really, really good.
Yeah, man, this show pretty much came out of nowhere for me. I didn't know about it, and I watched it earlier this week, and it's just so funny. And then, like you said, by the end of it, you're genuinely interested in finding out who drew the dicks.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, the episode where they keep going back to that, like, computer generated diagram of getting a hand job on like the dock. Like, anytime that came up, I lost it. It was
it's really, really funny.
Hilarious. So yeah, this show is pretty awesome. It's pretty ingenious, and came out of nowhere. It's definitely one of the better things I've watched lately.
For sure. So who do you think did it? I'm just curious.
The person that
should we even go should we even go into it though with the spoilers?
I mean, I won't say a name. I'll just say the person that they allude to having done it at the end of the season, I'm pretty comfortable with.
Yeah, me too. It was kind of funny because my wife and I, we watched it. I think we watched the first 4 episodes the first night, and then we finished it the very next night. And we sat down to finish it, to get the last half of the season. And I asked her the same question. I was like, who do you think did it? And she's like, I don't know, probably the guy that they're invested, like they expelled. And I was like, I don't think so. Like, I think humor-wise, that would be kind of funny. Like, the whole time he's been telling them and he's just been lying to him. I think that would be kind of a funny way to go about it. But I think ultimately that would disappoint most people. So that's not the way that I thought they were going to go with it. I thought it was his girlfriend, and I was sort of right at one point, and so I was kind of excited about that. But I won't spoil anything if it was really her or not. But yeah, I agree with you. I think I like that they leave it a little open ended, but they do such a good job investigating it. You kind of just assume it's that person.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so let's jump right into comics. What'd you read this week?
I read one of the Dark Knight's Metal tie-ins, which is Batman the Red Death #1. So I have not read Dark Knight's Metal 2 yet. I have it in my stack of things to read, but apparently at the end of that comic, a Bat Flash figure comes to the Earth where the main continuity takes place in DC Comics, and along with like other evil versions of Batman that they call the Dark Knights. So this book is essentially the origin of that Batman from another world that's like half Batman, half Flash, and it tells that Batman's origin story. So Dark Knight's Metal, whenever it started, it promised to explore dark corners of the DC multiverse, and it's definitely keeping its promise with this book. The origin story for this character called Red Death takes place on Earth 52. So the Bruce Wayne on this Earth is tormented over not only losing his parents, because I mean every Batman in any continuity is tortured by that, and that's the whole reason that they're Batman, but is also tortured because his whole Bat family has died. So Dick Grayson, Tim Drake, Jason Todd, and Damian Wayne are all dead. So he decides, because of this and because he's kind of been pushed over the edge, that he needs to be everywhere at once to prevent things like this from happening again. So he can't do it without being a metahuman. So basically what he sets out to do is he defeats all of the Flash's rogues and gets their weaponry, and then sets his sights on Barry Allen to merge with Barry's Speed Force and become the Red Death, which he is successful in doing. So Barry, it's kind of weird because they like merge together, and Barry's still kind of present in Bruce's mind and is constantly telling this evil Bruce Wayne to stop. But of course, he's never listened to, and he just kind of sifts to the back, or he just kind of is in the background of things. So the Red Death's new goal is to not only just save Gotham, but he wants to save the world, which is what he says he should have promised his parents when they died, was that he was going to save the world, not just Gotham. So he isn't able to do this on Earth 52, however, because it's basically that Earth is destroyed. So he finds himself on Earth Zero, which again is where the main DC continuity takes place. And overall, it's a pretty cool story. And it sets up, it's a cool origin story for one of the Batmans that show up, I guess, at the end of Dark Knight's Metal 2, because each of them are vastly different, but all of them are evil. And I guess they're setting up that Batman's going to have to defeat these 6 or 7 other Batmen. So it's cool to see how this Batman came to be on Earth 52. It's also what I think, why I think it resonated more for me was because, a few months ago we had the crossover with Batman and Flash that was much more collaborative between the two, and saw them working together and to defeat the Reverse Flash and the issues with the button, the Watchman button that they've been planting seeds for the last couple of years. So to go from that to this, where Batman just straight up defeats the Flash and steals the Speed Force, is a pretty cool dark shadow to that other story. So it was a fun read. I won't lie, the multiverse stuff kind of confuses me sometimes and feels a little too convoluted, so I'm not always on board with all of that. But again, just kind of a fun off story that sees an evil Batman, which is always fun.
Yeah, this book sounds pretty convoluted. Like, I have not read Dark Knight's Metal 1 yet. Like, cause you described it on the episode when it came out and it sounded like it sucked. And I have been kind of dreading reading it since. And honestly, I haven't been to the shop in like 2 weeks. So I haven't even gotten the new issue yet. So I will eventually catch up on it, but I have not read it yet.
Cool. What'd you read this week?
All right. So like I said, I haven't been to the shop in a couple of weeks, and I know that I have not done a new comic book day video in a while. I think it's actually been like a month, but I've had some personal stuff, and so I've been trying to get caught up on some of my reading. So
did you try really hard right there not to say, well, I've had some personal stuff, so fuck you guys? That's what
no, it just,
say.
There was some stuff that happened a few weeks ago that obviously took precedent over the little new comic book day videos that I did. And then that got me backed up in my reading, and I haven't really got caught up. So my videos would have just been me, oh, here's the book I picked up, but I'm not caught up on it yet. So
yeah.
I think really kind of the purpose of those videos is me kind of, here's what I picked up and here's what I think about it. So, cause we only get to talk about 1 or 2 books a week on the podcast. So I try to use those videos as an excuse to kind of talk about all the stuff that I read. Anyways, I posted this on Facebook a while, I guess earlier this week, that Amazon had this like ridiculous digital sale. I actually bought several books myself. I think there was like thousands of digital comics that were $5 or less. I bought quite a few books myself, and one of the books that I bought was Kingsman Secret Service, which is a book that I've never read before. And obviously, we're going to review the new movie, The Golden Circle, here in a little bit.
Oh shit! So, we are. I thought we were reviewing Lego Ninjago.
Well, see, week. You can't do that joke.
I know,
because you had already said that I was going to watch it.
I said it. God damn
it. So, anyways. Yeah, I wanted to read it before I went and saw the second film. And so I did that. I read it in a couple of days. And this book has been out for a while now, so I kind of feel silly. I'm not going to go into the usual stuff that we will discuss when we talk about comics, because I feel like we kind of give these comics a miniature review. This book has been out so long that it seems silly to do that. So I kind of want to talk about it as in context with the differences between that comic book and the movie. So obviously I'm going to go into a little bit of spoilers. So if you haven't seen the first movie, I'm not sure why you would be listening to this episode, because we're going to review the sequel, but also I'll touch on some spoilers for the book. So if you don't want to listen to that, just check out our show notes and skip ahead. But, I think that now that I've read this book, I think that I appreciate the first movie more, which is saying a lot because I like that movie quite a lot. I think that I like the fact that I didn't read this book beforehand, because I think I would have had a perception of what I thought the movie was going to be before I went and saw it. So I like the fact that I love it for what it is and not love it for what I thought it was going to be. So the book is surprisingly a lot different than the film. They changed several key things, which is surprising to me because they credit Matthew Vaughn, the director of the film, as a co-plotter. I'm not quite sure what exactly that means, but they had written this comic book with the intention of making it a movie. They were kind of working on the two things simultaneously, from what I understand. And so I was surprised at how different it was from the movie. Colin Firth's character is actually Eggsy's uncle in the book, which I think is an interesting change for the better in the movie, because in the book it doesn't seem like it's too much of a stretch to get him to join the Kingsmen, because there's already that trust there because he's his uncle and he trusts him as a person. So he doesn't have to convince him too much. Not that the movie spends too much time convincing Eggsy. It's just that I think that it's a change for the better, because he's a little suspicious of Colin Firth's character at the beginning, and I think that's a unique change in the movie versus the book. The villain is pretty much the same.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, you don't have the nuances of Samuel L's character, kind of what he brings to that character. But as far as the villain, it's pretty much the same. There is a little bit of a change, and I'm glad that they took it out because it's super, super weird. So the villain in the comic book gives his henchmen nicknames, and the henchmen hate the nicknames. And I don't understand. Like, it never pays off. And it's just a weird little thing that keeps popping up throughout the book. And I just thought that was super weird, so I'm glad that they cut that out. The plot is basically the same in the comic book and the movie, but there's much more detail in the movie versus the book, which I actually liked, because in the movie you see the shit hit the fan towards the end while they're kind of trying to interrupt the plan of Samuel L. Jackson's character. So you actually see people beating the shit out of each other and killing each other. In the book, again, spoilers, they dispatch the villain before all that stuff happens. So you don't really need to necessarily know a ton about how it works, because you're never going to really see it work. So I thought that was a kind of a cool change in the movie versus the book. There's a lot more training in the book than in the movie, which I think is smart, because you have a little bit more time. They kind of actually make a joke about how this isn't the movies and we don't expect you to know everything right off the bat. So it's a lot different, because in the movie, he's pretty much a badass from the get-go. And so I appreciated that in the book, that you kind of get to see him, and you kind of get to see him have his growing pains as far as the training's concerned. In the book, the mother, even though the mother does play a role in both versions of the story, the mother in the book is a much more of the driving force behind him joining the Kingsmen and what he does and trying to give her a better life. You do see a little bit about that in the movie, but I think that she plays a much bigger emotional role in the book versus the movie.
Yeah, so I remember when the first Kingsman came out, I obviously loved it very much, and I picked up the graphic novel to read pretty quickly after I saw that, and I never read it. So it's like it's sitting on my bookshelf at home. So I'll read it someday, but from what I understand, it was quite a bit different from the movie, but you make it sound like it's maybe not too far off. So I'll have to give it a go.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has its differences. Like I said, I was surprised at how different it was because, like I said, they were kind of making them at the same time. But there's some differences between the two, like I said.
Yeah, cool. So you ready to move on to nerd news?
Yeah, what do you got this week?
Not a ton, but a couple cool trailers I want to solicit to your feedback on. So the first was kind of out of nowhere. It was the new trailer for the Tomb Raider movie they're doing with Alicia Vikander. So I know you watched it because you posted on our Facebook some reaction to it, but I, for one, thought it was pretty fucking awesome. It definitely looks like it's in the veins of the newer games, and I never saw the two original Tomb Raider movies with Angelina Jolie, but it looks to be taking it pretty seriously, which is cool. And of course, Alicia Vikander's an Academy Award-winning actress at this point, right? So it's cool that she's playing this character, and I thought it looks like a pretty badass action movie.
Yeah, I loved it. You had convinced me to get the first Tomb Raider game, the kind of the reboot, I guess. And it took me forever to actually play it, and I played it, and it was really, really fun. I liked it quite a lot. And there's a couple of scenes in this trailer that look dead up like they just cut it from the video game.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was really, really cool to see. That's obviously the direction that they're going for, and I'm really, really excited about it. I haven't played Rise of the Tomb Raider just yet, but I plan on before this movie comes out.
Yeah, me as well. So the other trailer I wanted to talk about was the new trailer for the Netflix original series, The Punisher. So obviously starring John Bernthal and set in that Marvel TV universe that is going on Netflix. So this is the newest trailer. It might be the last trailer, depending on when the release date is. What's interesting about this trailer, and I'll get to the release date here in a second, is that at the end of it, they blur out the date, and it just says 2017 for whenever it's premiering. And I think that the internet has pretty much uncovered when it's debuting, but it's interesting that they are not releasing that information. But the trailer itself is pretty awesome. It looks pretty much in the vein of The Punisher and looks pretty brutal. So I'm pretty excited for it.
Yeah, the trailer itself, and I know you're a big Metallica fan, that was really, really cool, the way they did that.
Yeah.
I thought that was so cool. I'm not even a fan that much. I mean, I appreciate them because they're good musicians and everything, but it's not the style of music that I like. But I really thought that was so cool.
Yeah, and it's especially fitting because that song, One by Metallica, starts off so slow and then builds up to a heavy metal song, which is kind of basically the Punisher's origin story. You know, you have the slow, dramatic things that happen with his family getting killed, and then it turns into him just kicking ass and killing people. So, as far as the date goes for the show, somebody saw a scan in some magazine that says it comes out October 13th, which is like, what, 3 weeks away?
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen, man.
I think that they're doing something where they're gonna they're trying to do like a surprise release, because at the end of that trailer, like they purposefully blur out the date. So I know the original date that everybody was thinking was November, but I think that they're gonna try to do something that's a bit of a surprise, and the internet might have kind of blown that for everybody.
Yeah. If it does premiere, October is going to be a real busy month.
Yeah.
I mean, we have Shocktober, the Fractured Butthole South Park game comes out on the 17th, I believe, October. Stranger Things Season 2 comes out. Mario Odyssey comes out. It's going to be a real busy month.
Yeah, I'm nervous for Shocktober for me, just because I don't have a ton of free time during the week anymore. So, you know, if I'm nervous for doing like our one main staple of October, then obviously I'm nervous to be able to, you know, watch this show in its entirety as well as Stranger Things. And I don't plan on playing the South Park game, but it definitely sounds like a packed month, but it's pretty cool too.
Yeah, I've already asked off for Stranger Things season 2.
No,
I will be off that day, and I've already asked off for Shocktober in Irvington, so I'm looking forward to that as well. But it's going to be a real busy month. Got my movie pass card, so I'm going to be seeing it at least one more time because I had such an awful theater experience. I want to give that another go as well.
Cool. So the last piece of news I have is related to Terminator. So all of the reboot stuff that we've talked about, or I guess not reboot, but the movie that James Cameron's producing and Tim Miller's directing has all been confirmed now. And I believe it was James Cameron that said that not only is Arnold returning, unfortunately, but Linda Hamilton is returning for this new movie, which is pretty crazy because obviously she's not been in the picture since Terminator 2. And I was looking at her filmography on IMDb, and she's not really done anything of note in a while. So she's 60 years old, but she'll be back for this Terminator movie that they're pretty much making a sequel to T2, I think. I think they're ignoring 3, Salvation, and Genesis at this point.
Yeah, I want to be excited about this movie because of the people involved, but we've been burnt so many times with the Terminator franchise. I mean, they haven't had a good movie. I guess Salvation was decent, but really since T2, there hasn't been a good Terminator movie. But they keep trying different things, and Arnold's back for this one or this or that, and they try to get us excited with a gimmick here and there, and then it never ends up paying out. So I don't know. I'm gonna keep my expectations in check for sure.
Yeah, cool. So that is honestly all I have for nerd news.
All right, so we're going to jump right into the main topic. It changes from episode to episode. We've been reviewing a lot of movies, and that's going to continue. Like I said earlier in the episode, we're going to be reviewing Kingsman, The Golden Circle, which of course is a sequel to Kingsman, The Secret Service. Both movies were written and directed by Matthew Vaughn, who did Kick-Ass 1 and 2. He's also done some X-Men movies. So, I mean, he's obviously a director that we both like. I forgot last week to do a synopsis of Mother, but that movie was batshit crazy.
Did you say he did both Kick-Ass movies? Because he only did
Did he not do the second one?
No, thank God. He only did the first one.
Oh, I thought for some reason he did both of them. But anyways, yeah, last week I didn't do a synopsis, so I wanted to make sure that I got it in this episode.
Yeah,
so
heaven
with
forbid, man. Go for it.
Don't interrupt me. That's two already. Don't interrupt me again.
It's a podcast. We're supposed to talk back and forth, motherfucker.
Like my wife always says, nothing happens at 3. I'll count to 3, but nothing ever happens. Anyways, with the Kingsmen in disarray and the world being poisoned by a drug cartel, Eggsy and Merlin must team up with the Statesmen and Kingsman-esque organization in the United States. Of course, we reviewed the first film when it came out early in 2015. When I went and saw that movie, I didn't really expect a whole lot. Like I said, I hadn't read the book. I just read the book this past week. It had an early release, and that's usually, for movie nerds, kind of a red flag because they usually drop pretty shitty movies around that time. I think, if I remember correctly, it was released like really early February 2015. And so that was a red flag for us for sure. But I actually, not knowing a whole lot about this movie, I think played to its advantage because it's I mean, obviously inherently silly. And it was just so much fun because I didn't know what to expect, and I was just blown away by how much I like it. And I've seen it several times since, and I like it even more every time I see it. So it's rare when you find a movie like that. So I was curious / anxious to see how I was going to feel going into a sequel to this movie because now I have expectations for the franchise.
Oh, is this my turn to talk now? Am I allowed?
Yes.
Oh, perfect.
We did this Skype video so you could see when I was about to stop talking.
Oh, yeah, but I had to make a point. So, yeah. No, I love the first one quite a bit. Was excited for this one. And was excited that we didn't have to wait too long for it. I mean, it's only been 2.5 years since the first one came out. But, yeah, let's just get into it, man. I have some stuff to say.
Okay, so broad strokes is the first thing that we always talk about with these reviews. It's just kind of a general overview of what we feel about the movie before we kind of dive into the story and performances and so on and so forth. I think people complain a lot about sequels. And the big complaint, which I sometimes agree with, is sequels generally will take what you love about the original film and kind of turn it up to 11. And the problem with this movie is that the first movie is kind of a parody or homage or whatever you want to call it to the spy genre. And that's a genre that's already kind of inherently silly. So if you take it to a next level with the Secret Service, it's pretty silly. And then if you turn that up to 11 with the sequel, which is what they did, it gets pretty fucking crazy pretty quickly. And I didn't think I honestly had a line when it came to these movies because, like I said, I understand the genre and I know that it's going to be silly because the first one is silly, but it's silly in the best way. It's really fun. But they crossed my line, which is robot dogs.
Okay, good to know. Pat's line is robot dogs. So, yeah. For me, I loved the first one, obviously. We both did. It was number 2 on my top 10 of 2015. So, obviously a movie that I hold near and dear to my heart. I was immediately eager for the sequel and was pumped that it was fast-tracked and that Matthew Vaughn was coming back because he doesn't typically do sequels. Unfortunately, this movie fucking blows. No, I'm kidding. It does not fucking blow, but it, does not come close to what I consider the brilliance of the first Kingsman movie. With that being said, I went into it knowing that it was going to be hard to replicate the amazingness of the first movie, but what we end up with is basically an adequate action movie that isn't necessarily terrible, but is overall a pretty big disappointment for me.
Yeah, for sure. So let's just jump right into the story. Do you want to go first, or?
Yeah, sure.
You were complaining about me talking a lot, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been doing that for the last 11 years of our friendship or whatever it's been, so.
And I have not listened to you one bit.
So, the biggest problem with the story for me is it feels like they tried to do way too much, and that even 2.5 hours, which is the running time of this movie, wasn't enough to fit it all in. Nothing felt very fleshed out over the course of the movie. There were a lot of different threads, and none of them felt genuine. So, a lot of things felt forced to either, set up an action piece or for emotional moments that didn't make a lot of sense. So, for one example, and of course I won't spoil anything too much here, towards the end of a movie, a character dies, and that death kind of comes out of nowhere and doesn't make much sense in the grand scheme of things. It's especially disappointing given the character that bites it, and the fact that it doesn't feel needed in the moment just upset me because it didn't, in my opinion, further the story or add motivation, and that could have been saved for a different moment in the climax, in my opinion. So little things like that are littered throughout the movie and had me wondering why it was needed. So instead of sitting there watching Kingsman: The Golden Circle and just being in awe of it like I was with the first one, I kept asking why. Why did they make that decision here? Why would that character do that there? They completely fucked up, in my opinion, bringing back Harry. So I thought that it was cool that Colin Firth was coming back because he was my favorite part of the first Kingsman, and I don't think it's a spoiler saying he does come back because he's in the trailers. But the way they do it, there's no depth to it, and it doesn't seem to have a big impact. And then one other thing I want to call out for the story is that Elton John is in this movie, and going into the movie, I knew that he was cast in pre-production, but his scenes were so cringeworthy and felt so unneeded. And I was actually pretty optimistic about him being in this movie because I appreciate his music, but what they had him do just made me kind of cringe in my seat. So, whereas the first one was kind of, like you said, an homage to spy movies, this one was just like, I don't know. It felt cheesier than the Roger Moore Bond movies did. So it was definitely a bummer.
Yeah, so I think we're going to disagree on a few things here and there, but for the most part, I think we're, as usual, we're in the same mindset as far as this film's concerned. So, Matthew Vaughn is pretty pissed at the marketing team right now, for spoiling a lot of twists, especially in the first act. I think was kind of destroyed by the trailers. I was pretty pissed when I was seeing, this movie because I wasn't sure that they were going to go as far as they did, but because I saw most of the big twist in the first act, I was really disappointed because I'd seen it 100 times, and I think that moment could have been really heartbreaking if we hadn't already seen it a few times. Which I think is a shame because I think there's a lot of good stuff in that first act. I think that it's really cool that they started off with the car chase scene because they did that in the first movie. I like that they bring back the princess because that joke is funny, but I like the fact that it's not just this one-off joke now because they do end up becoming a couple, and I think that's pretty cool that they brought her back.
Nothing says love like anal sex, man.
Pretty much. I mean, it legitimately that's what it says on the inside of my wedding ring. So, it's just weird that you use the exact phrasing that I have on my wedding ring. Anyways, sequels have the advantage of not having to set anything up because they can rely on what the first movie did. The first movie in franchises kind of does all the heavy lifting for it. Unfortunately, like you said, there was so many threads in this movie. It felt like it slowed it down so much. They had to introduce the villain, which of course, I mean, any movie was going to have to do that no matter what. But then they also had to introduce the statesman. They had to bring Harry back. There's so many things in this movie that just slowed it down to a screeching halt. It was really, really hard because you mentioned that it's 2.5 hours and there were scenes where you felt every second of that runtime. And that was definitely disappointing because I think there's some good stuff in there. I do like The Statesman, even though it did slow the movie down, kind of establishing that part of the franchise. I did think was disappointing because it did slow the movie down. But I will agree in a certain sense, bringing Harry back was bad. Like, I didn't like it. I liked it, again, I liked the character was back, but I don't agree that they brought him back because I think it cheapens the first movie a tad bit because that's such a big moment in the first movie and you cheapen it by bringing him back. But once they made the decision to bring him back, I think that they did it not necessarily in a cool way, but it was a way that made sense. I won't spoil anything. It just, the way that they did it made sense for the character. Because if he's been alive this whole time, why he hasn't reached out to anybody yet? So I think, and I'll leave it at that, and obviously I'm trying to be vague so I don't spoil anything, but I agree with you, Tyler. I didn't like the fact that they brought him back, and I didn't necessarily like the way that they brought him back, but the rationale made sense. So I actually really liked Mark Strong's character arc in this movie.
I thought I mean, we'll get to him in performances too. I mean, I don't dislike his character arc by any means. I'll put that out there.
I think that they did a really good job because Harry's not in this film, at least for the first half. I think that they did a really good job of kind of filling that father figure void in the movie, because that's a really important role in the first movie, and I think that he definitely filled that in this sequel, at least for the first half of the movie, and I really liked his arc. I liked the villain in the sense that it wasn't too ridiculous. Judging by Kingsman and spy genre standards, it was a pretty ridiculous villain, but I feel like its ridiculousness was on par with how ridiculous Samuel L. character's arc is in that first film. I mean, it's batshit crazy, but it's on par with how crazy the first film is. The final twist was really, really heavy-handed and shoehorned in. I really hated that. It was pretty obvious what was going to happen, and I didn't like it at all. Like, I thought it was unneeded. I think that you could have maybe not necessarily milked, because that has a negative connotation to it, but I think you could have done more with the big bad than they did in the third act, instead of having that twist at the end. I didn't like that twist at all. Which is kind of a shame, because I did think that they did some really subtle planting in this movie. Now, I'm using subtle in quotes, because everything is kind of over the top in this movie, but judging by their standards, it was pretty subtle. I thought the Elton John stuff was funny at first, but like you, there's really no reason for him to be in this movie. I thought he was pretty silly towards the end, especially there's like this kung fu fighting scene towards the end where he's involved, and I thought that was just fucking stupid. Like, there's no reason for that to be in the film.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
All right, so let's jump right into performances. What do you think about the performances?
I mean, I will say that's one part of the movie that I really honestly don't have many complaints. Obviously, this cast is pretty amazing. Not only the people that returned, but also the additions. Like, look, I mean, they added Halle Berry, Channing Tatum, Jeff Bridges, the list goes, Julianne Moore, like, so tons of heavy hitters, and obviously they all, knocked it out of the park, in my opinion. I was most, I think, impressed with, Julianne Moore. I thought she was awesome as the villain. She's kind of like a sociopath, kind of a psychopath, but, adds like this charm factor to it that I thought was really creepy and really well done. And then everybody that returned, Colin Firth, Taron Egerton and Mark Strong, they were all great as well. Mark Strong was especially great. I didn't know he could sing so well. There's some parts of it where apparently his character likes country music and he sings, Take Me Home Country Roads. And I thought that he did a really good job in those scenes as well. So, I have no complaints on the performances. I thought everybody elevated the movie as much as they could.
Oh yeah, for sure. I completely agree. There's nobody that I thought was bad. I will say that, and this is not necessarily a performance, I think it's more material than anything else. I really liked Colin Firth's character in the first one. I liked kind of how he had that gentleman swagger to him, and he's a completely different character for most of this movie, and I feel like that kind of hindered his performance. Now, that's just a personal preference of mine. I liked his character more in the first one than the second one. So I definitely could see the argument on the other side saying that, oh, he's a different character, so he kind of had to show more range, and his performance is actually a little bit better in this movie versus the first movie. I just, personal preference-wise, I just prefer the character from the first movie. And, I mean, you do get to see a little bit of that towards the end, but I think it kind of hinders his performance because I really like that kind of gentleman swagger that he has in the first film. I basically agree with everything that you said. I kind of have a bit of a crush on Julianne Moore, so she can do no wrong as far as I'm concerned. I really dug the Stepford wife thing that she kind of had going on in most of this movie. I thought she was definitely creepy in that sense. Jeff Bridges was born to play a cowboy. I don't know what it is about him. And he seems like, just personally, like some of the podcasts and interviews and stuff that I've heard him on, he seems kind of like a hippie. He seems more like the dude from The Big Lebowski than anything else. But for some reason, he can play a cowboy so well. We saw it in Crazy Heart. We see it in, of course, True Grit. He's great in this movie, but I mean, obviously he's a sillier version of those characters. But man, I mean, obviously he's good at playing a cowboy because he's a great actor, but it just, for some reason, that type of character just really fits his style so well. What else do I have?
So one person I forgot to call out was Pedro Pascal, who plays Whiskey. And I didn't put it together until after the movie was over that he also played Oberyn Tyrell in
Yep.
Right? No, not Tyrell. Oberyn.
I knew who you were talking about. I forget
his last name, but Oberyn in Game of Thrones. And he is Colombian born, and he plays a Kentucky Southern so well. I didn't even realize that he wasn't Southern. So I forgot to call him out for being great, and I wanted to do so. And
his character I just didn't like.
He's not Colombian born. He's Chilean. So I don't want to offend anybody there. But he was great playing a Southern.
Yeah, sometimes it's just hard for me to compartmentalize the character from the performance. And so I didn't really like his character, so therefore I wasn't too blown away by his performance, which I know that's just me personally. Like, I should still be able to appreciate it. In a lot of movies I can, but for some reason I couldn't compartmentalize it in this one.
Cool.
All right, so the last little bit that we're going to talk about is the action. And this is obviously, this movie is an action movie, so there's quite a lot in it. And most of the action in this movie, like in the first film, is bananas, but I think it's bananas in the best way. It's so much fun. I liked that they started the film with a car chase, like I mentioned before. I liked that they kind of tried to recreate some of the fight scenes, or at least some of the moments, the feel of some of those moments in the first film. Most notably the bar scene with Colin Firth, but they changed it up, and I thought the way that they did it was really fun. It kind of went with what his character is right then, versus what his character was in the first movie, which I thought was great. Other than that, I mean, the action was really great in this movie. There's not a whole lot else to say.
So for me, it was never going to, it couldn't live up to the first movie, because that church scene in Kingsman, The Secret Service, is probably one of my favorite action scenes of all time. I just love that scene so much. It's just a culmination of a lot of things in that movie that make sense and are awesome. But, going into it knowing that it was never going to live up to that scene, I thought that it was pretty good as well. I particularly liked the end scene that, I can't really give away who's fighting in the end scene, but it's done to like a country rock version of Word Up, and it's done really well, and it's kind of shot in the same vein as that church scene was in the first one. So, one thing's for sure, Matthew Vaughn knows how to do action really well, so I have no complaints either.
Yeah, and one thing that we haven't mentioned, and we don't talk a ton about it in our reviews, and maybe we should, is the music. It's done so well. It was done in the first movie really well. I still smile when you start the first movie and they have that Dire Straits song at the very beginning, because I love that song, and it goes so well with the opening scene in that movie, and they do it really, really well in this movie as well.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
All right, so I'm pretty sure I know where you're going to go with this, but what's your star rating?
So I've kind of been tossing around a few things in my mind since I got out of the theater last night, as far as what I was going to do star rating wise. And for me, this again is not an amazing movie, and it doesn't even come close to its predecessor. But at the end of the day, it's not bad, and there are a lot of moments that are a lot of fun. So I am going to recommend it, and I'm going to give a 3.
Oh, really? I thought I was going to be a little bit higher, especially when we were going through our review. It seemed like I was a little bit more positive than you. I'm also going to give it a 3. It does feel long. Like I said, they do have a few threads that they have to set up, which is unusual for a sequel. And it makes the film drag, and you feel a lot of that runtime throughout the movie. And I just didn't catch myself smiling as much, not even close to as much as I did in the first movie. So I'm going to go with 3 as well, because we've kind of established that as a recommendation, the lowest recommendation we can give. And I definitely think that you should see this movie, because it does have its moments, but like you said, it's nowhere close to the first one.
Yeah, if anything, go see this movie so they make another one and have another shot at making a better sequel.
Yeah, and
with preferably more butt stuff, because this movie definitely lacked anal sex jokes compared to the first one. All right, man. So you ready to put a cap on this?
For sure. What do you got for nerd favorite this week?
So nerd favorite, obviously we talked about Tomb Raider in nerd news. So I am curious. I know that we've done favorite video game based on a movie, but we have not done favorite movie based on a video game, which is a hard nerd favorite because 99.9% of them really, really blow. So I'm going to put you to task there and ask you to find one. So for me, I think that it is probably the first Resident Evil movie. I don't think that those movies are great by any means, but I think that franchise did start off on a pretty decent foot. I remember being, I think, in junior high when it came out, which is crazy because that franchise just wrapped up, last year? So, the zombie genre wasn't oversaturated at the time, so it was kind of fresh in that regard. And it was kind of like a weird sci-fi movie that I found myself enjoying. So it's definitely not something that I revisit very often, but I do have a bit of a soft spot for that first Resident Evil movie.
I have not seen a second of any of these movies.
Oh, yeah? That's surprising to me.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed playing the game with you, but I wasn't really a huge fan of the franchise, the video game franchise. So I had no reason to watch the movies, and honestly, I hadn't heard real good things about it.
Yeah, I don't mind the first one, but I don't think any of them are really that close to the video games, anyways. I think it's just like a branding thing. Yeah,
for sure. That's what I've heard.
Cool, man. So what's your favorite?
Well, like you mentioned at the beginning, it's a lot of shit. So, it's kind of hard to pick one out. The one that kind of comes to my mind, and it's kind of funny because I used to say that I like the sequel better, which is blasphemy because the sequel is like one of the worst movies I've ever seen now that I'm adult. But, Mortal Kombat, and that movie's not even that good. Like, that's how bad video game adaptations are, because that movie is really not that good. It's not even that good of an adaptation as far as the actual games are concerned. It's just a big name so that they made a movie of it, of course, because that's what they do in movies in Hollywood. It's just not a very good movie. I like it because I like the franchise so much and I like the games. But yeah, the first movie is Citizen Kane compared to Annihilation. That movie is really, really bad, which is funny, like I said, because I used to say that I liked Annihilation better, but that was because I was a little kid when that movie came out and I thought it was really cool. They had all the other characters that you don't see in the first one because you see there's so many characters in Mortal Kombat, and in Annihilation they had a lot more characters than they do in the first one. That's why I kind of liked it a little bit more, because you got to see more characters. But I watched that movie, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, and I was like, this might be one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. It's really, really garbage. And so I was embarrassed that I used to tell people, like, I used to not go to war for that movie because I didn't feel that strongly about it, but I'd be like, no, Annihilation was better. And people would legitimately argue with me, and now I feel embarrassed that I've had that argument because it's a really, really bad movie. But like we said, it's a lot of shit. So it's kind of hard to find a good movie out of all of these just garbage adaptations.
Yeah. I haven't seen the Mortal Kombat movies since probably the 90s. So I don't have much of an opinion on them anymore, but I really, really liked him whenever I was, in grade school. So who knows?
Yeah, I will give them credit. I thought it was pretty impressive the way they did Goro. Like, it looks shitty now, but that movie came out I want to say it was like early 90s. So that movie, I mean, it's been a long time. And the fact that they were able to do Goro so well in that movie, I thought that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
All right, so that's it for whatever episode this is. I've lost track. As always, we'd appreciate if you subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use. We're on it. You can check out our website, thenerdspodcast.com. Comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram. They're both at The Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. You could also email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com and vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt.
We are the nerds you're looking for. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.